everyone, welcome to HomeRecordingMadeEasy.com, VisionRecordingStudios.com, and here on my YouTube channel, and this is Q&A video number 3, where I'm gathering all your questions on Facebook and on YouTube and kind of categorizing them by topics and gathering up all the questions, and then every week I'm going to go ahead and post a video such as this to try to answer your questions. I get a lot of emails and a lot of comments and a lot of questions sent to me on a weekly basis, and a lot of times it's the same sort of question over and over again, so it's easier for me just to answer it in a video format and gives me an opportunity to elaborate and explain in a way that might be easier for you to understand as opposed to writing it in an email. So if you want one of your questions answered in one of these videos, please go out to my Facebook page, go to Facebook and search for Home Recording Made Easy. Follow me on Facebook. Check out the other content that I have on my Facebook page, and please post your question there, and I'm going to gather them up and it'll be in one of these videos. So this week we're going to try to answer 4 questions, and it has to do with recording techniques and a couple other things. So let's start off with question number 1. Question number 1 comes from Peter Rice. Peter, thanks for writing in. I really appreciate it. He asks, hey David, in the industry dominated by Pro Tools, can working in PreSonus Studio One, particularly when mixing other people's sessions, ever be a disadvantage? That's a great question, Peter. If you would have asked me that question 2 to 3 years ago, I would have said yes, that not working inside of Pro Tools on a fairly regular basis could be a disadvantage, depending on what part of the industry that you're working in. Nowadays, every year that goes by, I would say that's becoming less and less an issue, is whether you're working in Studio One, Cubase, Logic, or anything else. So I guess it really depends on how you're working inside of the industry. If you're someone who is working, say, as a freelance mixer, which what it sounds like Peter it may be referring to, and let's say you're working with a lot of commercial studios, maybe based out of Los Angeles or based out of Nashville, where you're the people that you're dealing with may be, if they're working out of those two areas, working in commercial studios, a lot of those studios are still using Pro Tools. So if you're collaborating with folks that are using Pro Tools, then it is a good idea to at least have one of the later version of Pro Tools. I would say at least Pro Tools 10 or 11. I know as of the recording of this video, there's now Pro Tools 12, so you can share files back and forth. If you're not working in that kind of situation with the industry, and you're more of a freelance home studio person who's working with indie bands or indie artists, where people are sending you, say, WAV or STEM files to mix their projects, then I would say no, not using Pro Tools is not a disadvantage at all. I have Pro Tools. I have Pro Tools 11. I was a power user of Pro Tools for many, many years early on in my career, as a lot of other people were, as they were, and I would be safe to say probably still are the industry standard, but like I said, every year that goes by, I find that they're getting knocked off the top of that mountain a little bit every single year. And I think what we're going to see over the next 3 to 5 years is Pro Tools is not going to be the industry standard anymore. The newer generation, the newer folks that are getting into this business are more than not starting out with Pro Tools. They are starting out with other DAWs, whether it be Logic, whether it be Studio One, whether it be Cubase. Those seem to be the main 3 other players that tend to grab the newer and the younger generation coming into the business. Old people like me and people that have been around a little bit longer than me in the industry all grew up on Pro Tools, and a lot of us are still using Pro Tools. Now, I only have Pro Tools, and I haven't opened my Pro Tools rig in probably a year and a half. A couple of years ago, as I was starting to get into Studio One, I was kind of running both DAWs at the same time. All of my own productions and things where I had a choice on what DAW I wanted to use, I would pick Studio One hands down. But there were at that time still quite a few clients that were sending me Pro Tools sessions, so I needed to have Pro Tools, if for no other reason, to open up the session and then extract the STEM files so I could bring them into Studio One. But as I said, over the last year, I don't think I've opened Pro Tools once. Trying to think, I don't think so. And I mix records, and I mix songs and full-length records and EPs for clients all year round. I probably do anywhere from 10 to 15 projects a year, and some of those projects are full-length CDs, some of those projects are just single tracks or 2 or 3 tracks, and none of them come in Pro Tools anymore. What happens more times than not is people just send me the STEM files. Whatever DAW they're using, they export the WAV files with no effects on them. They send me the raw tracks. I bring them into Studio One. I do my thing. I send it back to them, and everybody's good to go. So I would say if you're someone who is new in the industry, someone who may be thinking about, maybe Peter's thinking about which DAW should I use? Do I think not using Pro Tools is a disadvantage? I would say no, unless you are someone who is already entrenched in the industry and working with studios that already use Pro Tools and you need to collaborate. Then unfortunately, you may be stuck with Pro Tools for a little bit longer. But I am not a fan of Pro Tools, and anyone that watches my channel knows that I'm a fan of Studio One. I've been using Studio One now for a couple, 2.5 years maybe, and I find it to be the most intuitive, most stable by far, and most easy to use DAW that's ever been produced. And I was a power user of Pro Tools. I was a power user of Cubase, which I think runs a close second to Studio One as far as, you know, what would be if Studio One didn't exist, what would I be using today? Probably Cubase 8. And I also own Logic as well. I had Logic for a lot of years, and I have it as part of, I'm a Mac guy, but again, I don't really use it. But I would say Pro Tools is my least favorite, and I would say Studio One is my favorite, and that's what I would recommend. So thanks again, Peter, for writing in. I hope that answered your question and then some. Question number 2 comes from Ernie Trevino. Hi, Ernie. Thanks for writing in. I appreciate it. David, what I am using is a PreSonus Studio Live mixer, the 24.4.2, as an interface. And I'm using an external preamp, the Universal Audio Solo 610. And I'm not getting a good recording signal, -10, -12 is what he's shooting for. I'm getting about a -24 to a -20. The way I have it connected is my mic from the Solo 610 is going into the 1/4 inch input on the mixer, which is bypassing the PreSonus Studio Live preamp. That's correct. And he's having to use the trim knob on the Studio Live because he's not getting a hot enough signal, and he wants to know what's wrong. Okay, so thanks, Ernie, again for writing in. So by looking at your question, you have your microphone going into the Universal Audio Solo 610, which is a fantastic preamp, by the way. It sounds like you got your gain already cranked up as much as you can on the Solo 610, and then from there, you're going out of the Solo 610 to the 1/4 inch input on the Studio Live mixer, so you can bypass the preamp, so you're not double preamping. Again, that's the way you'd want to do it. And you're finding you're getting about a -20 as opposed to a -12, even though the input is already cranked up on the Solo 610. So, and you're finding yourself having to use the trim knob on the Studio Live to make up the difference. And that's perfectly fine, by the way. There's nothing wrong with that. So my question would be, first and foremost, because you didn't put it in your question, I'm not clear on what you're plugging into the Solo 610. Is it a dynamic microphone? Is it a condenser microphone? If it's a condenser microphone, it probably needs phantom power. You want to make sure you have phantom power turned on the Solo 610. You may have already done this, but I don't know that by your question. Is it just a guitar you're plugging in? Is it an acoustic guitar? Is it an electric guitar? What are you trying to plug into the Solo 610? That would be the first thing I would ask. If it's something just like a standard, dynamic vocal microphone and you're not getting enough signal but the gain's cranked all the way up, then you can go ahead and you can use the trim control on the PreSonus Studio Live mixer to make up the difference. There's nothing wrong with that. But it sounds like whatever you're plugging into the Solo 610, sounds like it probably needs some phantom power, because if you got that gain cranked up all the way to 10, you shouldn't have to turn it up that high. You should probably not have to turn it up past 5 or 6 on the input side of the Solo 610. So something else may be going on there. I don't want to assume you have a defective unit. You probably don't, but I would want to know what are you trying to plug in and make sure it doesn't need phantom power, because if it needs phantom power, that will absolutely be your problem. So if you want to hit me up on an email and give me a little more specifics, I might be able to help you a little further. But check the input source, make sure it doesn't need phantom power, and then go ahead and use the trim control on the Studio Live mixer to achieve that -10, -12 dB. That's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with doing that, and that should help you, okay? So again, thanks, Ernie, for writing in. I really do appreciate it. Question number 3 comes from Larry Tate. Larry is a new subscriber to the YouTube channel. He's been on the channel now for a few weeks, and I see him commenting on a lot of the videos. And thanks, Larry. I do notice that you're on there being active, and I really appreciate it. And I've answered, I think, everything that you've put on my YouTube page. I've tried to hit you up with a response, so hopefully you read those responses. And again, thanks so much for sharing, and thanks so much for contributing to the channel. Okay, Larry asks, thanks, this is informative. I really like your videos. Well, thanks, Larry. I appreciate that a lot. He's using a Focusrite Claret preamp with a Focusrite Sapphire 40 as his interface. If I was to look into hardware EQs like the Warm Audio that you have, could I set up my drum overhead mics to go through the Warm Audio EQs and get a nice pre-EQ sound before going into his preamp? And he would also like to do that on vocals and maybe guitars in the same way. He says, I know usually it's always best to record dry, but maybe getting a better EQ'd sound off the bat would be a good idea with hardware, even though I can get away with it with plugins. Again, Larry, thanks for writing in. You're on the right track. Yes, it is always better, in my opinion, to try to do any kind of EQing on the way into your preamp, and even a little bit of compression. Don't be afraid to do that either. The reason why people will record stuff completely dry is because they want to be able to have full control after the fact. Now, you got some advantages and disadvantages. The advantages is the track is completely dry and you can EQ and compress it after the fact in the DAW with no problem at all. That's an easy thing to do. But the disadvantage of that, I feel, is it takes longer at the mixing stage. You don't always get that nice analog warmth from using some analog hardware, and you're not committing to the sound prior to the DAW. And it's always a good idea to do a little bit of EQ and compression if you can on the way in. But just be careful that, remember, whatever EQ settings you have going into the DAW, or whatever compression settings you have, once it's printed, it's there and you can't take it away. So a good practice and a good way for you to get better at your recording chops is to do some experimentation. But the answer to your question is absolutely. The Warm Audio EQs that you refer to, the Pultec style ones that I've talked about in some other videos, are a fantastic EQ for exactly what you want to do. So remember, they're mono EQs, so you're going to need, if you're going to do, say, stereo overheads, unless you're just going to do a mono overhead, you would need one for the left, one for the right. But for vocals, for guitars, going through the Warm Audio and getting a nice tone and a nice EQ setting the way you like to hear it at the recording stage is always best. Then you don't have to do any post-processing. It already sounds as good as you like it, or as good as it can, prior to any mixing. And that is ideal for any kind of recording. You want to get the sound as close to the final sound at recording as possible to make your mixing a lot faster, a lot easier, and you're making a commitment to the tone and a commitment to the sound prior to recording. And that's the way the pros do it. That's the way guys like me, who are not really a pro, do it. I always will EQ and compress a little bit on the way in. Again, not a lot. I mean, because once you take those drum overheads in your example and put them in with the rest of the mix, you may find that you may need to tweak some EQ a little bit more so it can play nice with the rest of the band in the mix. And that's totally fine, but you can do most of that shaping in the beginning. So the answer to your question is absolutely, it's a good thing to do. Absolutely, I would recommend it if you have the budget to get something like the Warm Audio EQs and try them. And again, don't be afraid to try some compression in the same way, because you can do that as well. So I hope that answers your question. Again, thanks so much for writing in and for subscribing to the channel. And let's see, the last question we're going to talk about for this video comes from John Ganzer. Hope I said that right, John. Again, thank you for writing in. He's written me a few questions over the last few months on the YouTube channel, and we've gone back and forth in email a few times. So welcome and thanks for writing in. Now, this is a long question, so I'm just going to kind of paraphrase this. But basically what happens is John wants to know about getting a huge guitar sound in his recordings. So what he did is he recorded each guitar part 4 times separately, not by copying tracks. So he has a guitar part and he recorded that 4 times. And he ran it through his DI box, 2 different guitars, and then ran the DI box into 2 amplifiers separately. So he has, let's see, a total of 48 guitar tracks, 24 DI tracks, and 24 mic'd tracks, thinking that the DI tracks he can add some plug-in processing after. So you have 48 guitar tracks. That's a lot of guitar tracks, man. That's awesome. And he played them all separately. 24 times he played the parts each time, not just copying tracks, which is the way to do it. You just don't want to copy and paste. You want to play those parts separately. But now when he listens back, he gets like kind of a chorusing and a phasey sound, especially on the higher guitar parts. And he's asking, what do you know causes this effect, and what do I recommend that he does? So basically, he's recorded 24 guitar tracks. He has DIs and he has amps, but he played the part, it sounds like, 24 separate times. And now when he listens back, he's hearing kind of a chorusy, kind of a phasey sound. And that's just because, again, you have 24 guitar parts played one after the other, and even though you probably played them super tight, one compared to the other, each take, they're always going to be a little bit off. And that's the beauty of when you double and triple record guitar tracks, is those little subtleties between the performances is what makes the guitar sound huge. The disadvantage is when you record that many tracks, you're going to get exactly what you're experiencing. You're going to get a chorusy and kind of a phase sound, excuse me, unless those tracks are super tight. And then even then, it's very difficult. So if you're looking to achieve a large guitar sound, you don't need to record that many tracks. I tell people you could record 2 guitar tracks, 4 guitar tracks at most, and by playing the part 4 separate times, and by panning them, say, hard left and hard right, you're going to get a huge guitar sound if the guitars sound tight. It's going to sound like a wall of sound. Now, some tricks that you can use to kind of to help enhance that is A, use different guitars on the guitar parts, or if you don't have access to more than one guitar, use different pickup configurations on those guitar parts. Play the same part. So if you had, let's say, a Les Paul for guitar 1, play the second part maybe with a Les Paul with a different pickup configuration. Maybe you're using the bridge instead of the neck pickup. And then for guitar 3, maybe you're using a Strat or a Tele. And then guitar 4 using a different type of guitar. By putting the 4 different guitars together with different pickup configurations, that's going to enhance that sound. The other thing you can do for getting a huge guitar sound, again, I haven't heard the guitar part, so I'm not sure what you're playing, but try to play in different positions on the neck. In other words, guitar 1, maybe you're playing all bar chords. And then for guitar 2, maybe you're playing that same part, but you're using open chords, or different octaves, or different intervals. There's ways to do that to where you get some different tonalities, and when you put all those together, excuse me, sorry about that. When you put all those together, that's going to enhance that wall of sound or that huge guitar sound. Okay, so try that. But the answer to your question is, I think the reason why you're getting that phasey chorusing sound is too many guitar tracks. And all those little subtleties is going to give you that kind of an effect. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, so that's it for this question and answer video. Again, thank you to everyone for writing in. Again, if you want one of your questions answered, please go out to the Facebook page and post your question on my Facebook page, and I will gather it up for the next Q&A video. And if you haven't done so already, go out to our YouTube channel. Please subscribe to YouTube and check out the videos. There's almost 200 videos there for free, so you can check out all the training and product demos and other Q&A videos and things like that. It's all up there. It's all for free. It's all for the taking. Go check it out. I'm adding new videos pretty much weekly at this point. And if you also want some more tips, tricks, concepts, techniques, and training around everything home recording, be sure, as always, go out to homerecordingmadeeasy.com. Check out the Made Easy series and the Quick Mix series. Super affordable, long-form training tutorials that will absolutely help make your recordings, mixes, and mastering projects go to the next level. So until next time, this has been Dave with homerecordingmadeeasy.com, and thank you once again for watching, and I will speak to you guys all soon. Take care.